the second batch of students to start with the computer architecture. Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Yes, Gritika. Gritika,
Yes,
Google,
sir.
Kanan, Google. Yes, yes, the session is open to you all. You can share your PPT and you can start your presentation.
Sir,
Already,
I ask permission to you, right? I'll be preparing tomorrow. I'll be presenting tomorrow.
you already got the permission, Gritika.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Fine, rest. Yes, you go ahead. Leave Kritika's portion and others you present.
Is my PPT visible?
Yes, I think so, Bhargav.
Okay. Good morning, sir, and good morning to everyone. I am Bhargav. In this class, me and my team members Joshua, Gokul, Kabilan, Gokular, and Gitika are going to discuss about computer architecture. Um, Let us begin with the introduction to computer architecture. Computer engineering is a specification describing how software technologies interact to create a branch podium or system. When we think of the word architecture,
Bhargav, you
we think
keep
of
your mic little closer, Bhargav.
okay, sir. Now it is audible, sir.
Is somewhat good.
Okay, sir.
Yes. Go ahead.
When we think of the word architecture, we keep thinking of establishing or building a house. Keeping the same principle, computer architecture suggests building a computer and all that goes into a brain system. Uh, it describes the capabilities and programming model of a computer. Uh, it is classified into many groups. We here discuss about instruction set architecture and micro architecture. Uh, First, we discuss about instruction set architecture. Instruction set architecture is a interface between the computer software and hardware, and also can be viewed as a computer's programmer's view of a machine. Uh, Usually, computers do not understand high-level programming languages such as Java, C++, and most of the programming language we used. Uh, the thing which makes them to understand is a processor uh, that understands the instructions encoded in some numerical fashion, usually as binary numbers, and software tools such as compilers will translate those high level languages into instructions that the processor can understand. uh, the ISA of a computer usually describes in a small instruction manual which describes how the instructions are encoded. This is a small glimpse about instruction set architecture. And coming to the micro architecture, uh, it is also known as a computer organization. This describes how a particular processor will implement these instructions we have talked before. And the size of the computer CPU cache, for instance, is an issue that generally nothing to do with this ISA instruction set architecture. Um, let's go with the
Bhargav.
types of instructions. Yes, sir.
Bhargav, had your breakfast, Bhargav?
Yes, sir.
Yes. You're
Okay.
sleepy.
Uh,
Yeah,
no,
yes,
sir.
you stop the presentation and you sing a song and then continue the presentation.
Sir, I don't know how to sing song. I'm not good
You,
at.
man, you in a brisk way you present your content, Barker.
Okay, okay, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Types of instructions. There are so many types of instructions like arithmetic instructions, branch instructions, data transfer instructions, logic instructions, and bit-oriented instructions. First one, arithmetic instructions are the instructions which perform basic arithmetic operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and like few more. And another branch instruction is instruction can cause a computer to begin executing a different instruction sequence and thus deviate from its default behavior of executing instruction in order. Another one, data transfer instructions. These instructions will transfer data in the microprocessor. Next one, logic instructions. Logic instructions are the instructions which perform basic operations, logical operations like or, nor, and, etc. And bit-oriented instruction. It is also same like a logical instruction, but these are performed on only a single bit. And these are the types of the instructions. And next one, instruction format. Instruction format is a layout or pattern of bits in the machine instruction that directs the CPU to decode and execute the instructions. Uh, there are some types: 0 address instruction, 1 address instruction, 2 address instruction, and 3 address instructions. Uh, what are these addresses? What is the addressing mode? The term addressing mode refers to the way in which the operand of instruction is specified. The addressing mode specifies a rule of modifying the address field of the instruction before the operand is actually executed. This data can either be stored in main memory RAM or it can be in the CPU register. Um, Next one is control flow. At the level of machine assembly language, which will be discussed further, these control in flow instructions usually work by altering the program counter. For some CPUs, the only control flow instructions available are maybe conditional or unconditional, which are also known as jumps. Uh, and these control flow instructions are used to divert the flow of the program and use it to implement a loop and subroutine calls. These are the introduction to the computer architecture and classifications, and Gokul Kannan will continue the next part. Gokul Kannan, you can carry on.
Audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
I'm audible, right? So I'll be talking about machine language, assembly language. Hey, can you move to the next slide, please? Bhargav, can you move to the next slide? Yeah. So during historically on olden computers, 11 slide. So historically on older computers, they have been built for only one purpose, like doing some arithmetic operations or collecting some data and processing them. They have been just created for doing such one task. But later on, they have found a universal computer with memory, CPU, which could execute which could do multitasking by getting instructions from a particular place. And these instructions are machine code. Machine code is just raw binary. Next slide. So as you could see in the image, writing a machine code on the right side, there will be machine code in binary. It will take such a long time. If there is a small error, it's gonna give a big impact on the program. So for humans to understand them and write to understand and write the machine code, there is something called as a bit higher language called as assembly language, which uses an assembler, as you could see in the picture, to convert the assembly language into a machine code. Next page. So assembly language, I wouldn't tell it to be a high level language. I will tell it as a moderate language, because there are a lot of programs, a lot of languages which has come above it, like C, Java, and Python. Most assembly language, as you could see in the image, uses an assembler to convert into machine code. But higher level languages like C and Java or Python uses compiler or interpreter depending upon a language. Interpreter directly converts it into a machine code, but compiler does a different process where it converts into intermediate assembly code and then goes to a machine code. Next page. So like I will be talking about the CPU also. CPU is the central processing unit of any computer. It's like a brain of the computer. So next page. So the basic units of a CPU are control unit, arithmetic and logic unit, and memory unit. Next page. So as you can see in the image, this is a mission cycle. This is how each and every unit talk with each other or communicate with each other. So I'll be talking about individual components. Next page. So we'll talk about control unit. Control unit is like the main part of the CPU. Maybe it does the major tasks of the CPU. So that directs the operations of the processor to the CPU. It tells the computer memory, arithmetic and logic unit, and input and output devices how to respond to the instructions that have been sent to the processor. It directs the flow of data between the CPU and other devices. Next page. So arithmetic and logic unit is a digital circuit within the processor that performs integer arithmetic and bitwise logic operations. The inputs of the ALU are the data words to be operand on status information from previous operation, and a code from the control unit indicating which operation to perform. Depending on the instructions being executed, the operand may come from internal CPU registers or external memory, or they may be constants generated by the ALU itself. Next page. So the memory management unit, sometimes also called as this page memory management unit, is computer hardware unit having all memory references pass through itself, primarily performing the transition of virtual memory address to physical memory address. By virtual memory address, they mean the RAM, and the physical memory address, they mean the SSD or the HDD. Modern MMUs typically divide the virtual address space into pages, each having a size which is a processor of 2, usually a few kilobytes, but they may be much larger. The bottom bits of the address are left unchanged, and the upper address bits are the virtual page numbers. So that's it. So next will be taken by Joshua.
Am I audible?
Yes, Joshua.
Yes, you are audible.
Background noise. Next slide, please.
Joshua, keep your mic closer.
Sir, am I audible now?
Yes, audible, but it's echoing. Yes, anyway, go ahead.
Clock rate. A CPU cannot operate alone when we give huge amount of data and instructions simultaneously. It needs other components to work for it, and for it, it requires a clock which synchronizes all the components of the system. And the rate at which the processor completes its total processing cycle in 1 second is called the clock speed or clock rate. The performance of the CPU has major impact on the speed at which a program is loaded and then executed. It is usually measured in megahertz or gigahertz, but for the first generation, it was measured in kilohertz. Generally, it is said that higher the clock speed, faster the CPU, but this may not be the only reason for a faster CPU. There are many factors behind it, like the number of processors, speed of RAM, bus speed, size of cache, etc. Some instruction requires more cycles from CPU to be completed, but it depends only upon the architecture of the CPU. Next slide, please. Evolution of processor. Before processor, the invention of transistor and the integrated circuit was a huge development towards the development of modern computer architecture. The transistor was invented in the year 1948, and the integrated circuit was invented in the year 1958. After this, we had our first microprocessor, which was invented by Intel, and the model name was 4004 in the year 1971. From the table, you can see that the Intel 4004, which was invented in the year 1971, has a clock speed of just 470 kilohertz. And as of now, the modern days, we have a maximum clock speed of up to 8.43 gigahertz, which was produced by the microprocessor of AMD. And we can also see the number of transistors from this table. And speaking of number of transistors, we have a famous law called Moore's law, which states that the number of transistors doubles every 2 years. If you are wondering who was Moore, he was a co-founder of the company Intel. Next slide, please. Pipelining. Pipelining is a technique where multiple instructions are overlapped during execution. It is a process of accumulating instructions from the processor through a pipeline. It allows storing and executing instructions in an orderly process. It is also known as pipelining process. The pipelining is divided into stages, and these stages are connected with one another to form a pipe-like structure. Instructions enter from one end and exit from the other end. If you want to improve the performance of the CPU, there are two ways. The one way is by increasing the clock speed of the CPU, which can also be called as overclocking. And the second method is by arranging one or more operations in an orderly manner, which is known as a pipeline. If you ask which is the better out of these two, the second process, which is the pipeline, is more efficient because overclocking may produce drawbacks like overvolting. Next slide, please. Design of pipeline. In a pipeline process, a pipeline has two ends, input end and the output end. Between these ends, there are multiple segments or stages. Each segment consists of an input register followed by the combination circuit. The register is used to hold data, and combination circuits perform operation on it. Each segment are controlled by a common clock. The output of the combination circuit is applied to the input register of the next segment as per the given diagram in the slide. Next slide, please. So stages in pipeline. Pipelining process has 5 stages. Stage 1, instruction stage. In this stage, the CPU reads instruction from the address in the memory whose value is present in the program counter. Stage 2 is the instruction decode. Instruction is decoded and the register file is accessed to get the values from the register used in the instruction. Stage 3 is the instruction execute. In this stage, the ALU operation are performed. Stage 4 is the memory access. In this stage, the memory operands are read and returned summoned to the memory that is present in the instruction. And last, stage 5 is the write back. In this stage, computed or fetched data is returned back to the register present in the instruction. Next slide, please. So pipelining hazards. Hazards are the situation that prevents the next instruction from executing during its designated clock cycle. There are 3 types of hazards: structural hazard, data hazard, and control hazard. Structural hazard cannot support certain combinations of instructions. Like if there are 2 instructions in the pipeline, it requires same resource of the time. And data hazard. Instruction depends on the result of the prior instruction still in the pipeline. And lastly, the control hazard. It is caused by delay between the fetching of instruction and decision about the changes in the control flow. That's it.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, Kabilan. Yes, Kabilan.
Good morning, everyone. So I'll be starting with memory systems. So memory is basically where we store our data. So
Maybe.
sorry, sir.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Kabilan.
Okay. So memory is basically where we store our data. So about these memory systems, we classify where we store our data into different segments. So about that, I'll be talking about it. So next slide, please. Okay, so memory we basically classify based on its hierarchy level. So we classify memory into 5 hierarchies based on its speed as well as the requirement we need it for. So based on the requirement, the processor moves from one level of hierarchy to another level. So the 5 hierarchies in the memory are register memory, cache memory, main memory, magnetic disks, and magnetic tapes. The first 3 in this hierarchy level, that is the register memory, cache memory, and main memory, are volatile memories. So volatile memories means that when there is no power, they lose their stored data. And the last 2 in this hierarchy level, which are magnetic disks and magnetic tapes, they come under not volatile, which means that even when there is no power, they don't lose their data. That is, they store the data permanently. So the next slide, please. Okay, so this is the memory hierarchy, which we generally represent through a diagram. So this is the diagram which represents the 5 hierarchies. From top to bottom, we have register memory, cache memory, main memory, magnetic disks, and magnetic tapes. In this, the first 3, that is the register memory, cache memory, and main memory, are classified into as primary memory, and the last 2 magnetic disks and magnetic tapes are said to be, they come under secondary memory. So also from this diagram, we can infer something, right? So we can infer it some about their capacity, the access time, their performance. We can infer from this. So we'll be seeing about that in the coming slides. So the next slide. Okay. So yes,
Go back to the past slide. Go back to the past slide. Any convergence and divergence influence over this memory hierarchy diagram, Kabilan?
Sorry, I didn't get you, sir.
With the register memory and divergence with the magnetic tapes has any influence, and there is any specific ideology or specific need to keep the register memory at the top and the magnetic tape at the bottom?
Yes, sir. So basically we classify this based on its what we need. Say register memory from top to bottom. Say for register memory, we can access it easily, sir. And magnetic tapes, the access time is slower because we need some input output modules. The processor cannot access these magnetic tapes and magnetic disk directly. That is secondary memory. We cannot access, the processor cannot access these directly. It can access them only through some input output module. So the access time is slower, but they are non-volatile, so they can store the data permanently. Whereas the register memory and cache memory and what comes under primary memory, even though they are volatile, but the speed is more. We can access them easily, sir. So I'll be talking about that in the coming slides.
Yes, go ahead.
The next slide. So as I said in the memory hierarchical diagram, we generally classify memory hierarchy into 2 types. The first will be as a primary memory and the other is as a secondary memory. So primary memory, we also call it as internal memory, and this is accessed by the processor directly. So the access time is quicker for this primary memory. And under primary memory, we have the first 3 in the classification, the main memory, cache memory, as well as the register memory. So the second type is secondary memory, which is also known as external memory. And this cannot be accessed by the processor directly, and we need some input output module to access them. So the access time takes a little longer. And under this secondary memory, it includes magnetic disks and magnetic tapes. So the next slide. Okay, so as I said, from that diagram of memory hierarchy, we can infer some characteristics. So the four things that we can infer are its capacity, access time, the cost per bit, as well as its performance. So capacity is it's basically the amount of information that the memory can store. So as we move from top to bottom, as we move from register memory to the magnetic disks and tapes, the capacity increases. So we can store more in magnetic disks and tape when compared to register memory and cache memory. So second thing we can infer is about the access time. Access time is the time interval between the read-write requests and the availability of the data. And so as we move from top to bottom in the hierarchy, the access time increases because in primary memory, the processor can access them directly. So the access time is quicker. Whereas in the secondary memory, that is in the bottom part of the hierarchy, we need some input-output module. So the access time is a little bit longer. The third thing we can infer is about the cost per bit. As we move from bottom to the top in the hierarchy, the cost per bit increases. That is the primary memory costs more than the secondary memory. So the last thing we can infer is about its performance. The next slide. So earlier, when the computer systems were designed without this memory hierarchical diagram, the speed gap increased between the register memory and the main memory due to large difference in access time. Because of this difference, it resulted in lower performance of the system, and thus some enhancement, some improvement was required. This improvement was made in the form of this memory hierarchical design, because of which the performance of the system increased. And one of the most significant ways to increase system performance is by minimizing how far down the memory hierarchy one has to go to manipulate data. So this is about memory systems. So I'll be continuing with bus. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so bus systems. So next slide. Okay, so bus is basically it's a communication system that transfers data between components inside a computer and or between computers. So this basically covers all the related hardware components and software, including the communication protocols. So bus system is basically a communication path for the data and the control signals moving between the components of the computer system. So this technique was actually developed to reduce costs and improve modularity. And although popular in the 1970s and the 80s, more modern computers used a variety of separate buses that was adapted to more specific needs based on the requirements. Next slide. So a brief history about the bus systems, how it came into existence and that. So the computers in the 1950s and the 60s, computers were generally constructed in an ad hoc fashion. That is for that purpose alone. For example, that is the CPU, memory, and input-output units were each one or more cabinets that were connected with cables. The engineers used the common techniques of bundles of wires and extended the concept as backplanes were used to hold printed circuit boards in these early machines. Next slide. The name bus was already used for bus bars that carried electrical power to various parts of the machine, including the early mechanical calculators. With the introduction of integrated circuits, it vastly reduced the size of each computer unit, and buses become the more standardized thing to use. And standard modules could be interconnected in more uniform ways, and they were easier to develop and maintain. So over to Gokul to continue with the bus systems.
Yeah, thank you, Kabilan. Am I audible, sir? Hello?
Yes, go. Go.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. And I'll be discussing about bus component, bus system, and iOS interface. Sir. Let's go the components of bus system. As Kabilan discussed previously, bus is it is a communication pathway that connects two or more devices. It's like a group of wire connecting devices in a computer. The bus that connects like and the bus that connects the major parts of the major components of the computers are called as system bus. Now let us go into the components of a bus system. Bus system and the components are classified as three types, and one is address line AL. It will be short formed as AL, and second one is data lines, which is shortened as DL, and control. And third one is the control line, which is classified. It is shortened as CL. Uh, Bago, can you change to next slide? Go to next. And let us go with then in deep in the components of bus system. First, address line. Address line. It is it is generally used to identify particular location in the main memory of the computer, or it can be used to find the source or the source of the and source um yeah source of the source or the destination of the memory. So that's why it is known as unidirectional one. That's why it is called as a unidirectional one, and and so it so that's why it's a unidirectional. Based on the width of an address bus, we can determine the capacity of a main memory thing. So that's what it's written on the thing. And the second one, data line. Data line. It is a data line. It is a collection of wire that is used to carry data from one device to another device. So that's why it is not. That's why it's going from a CPU to another part of the device or other part of the device to CPU. So basically, it's going in a both directions. That's why it's known as a bidirectional one, and it consists of 8, 16, 32, 64, and 128, and so on lines. So which are more separating lines will be combining. That's why it's called a group or a collection of wires. So each line here, that 8, 16, 32, 64, 128 lines, each individual line will be known as a bit, and the gap between those lines are called width, bus width. So it consists of 8 bits, 16 bits, 64 bits, 32 bits, and 128 bits, and so on, so on, so on. And 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 based on the width of the data bus, we can determine the length of an CPU, width length of an CPU, or based on the width length, we can determine the performance of an CPU. And the third one, the final component, is control line. It is actually it controls the address lines and the data lines, regulates the activities of address line and the data line buses. Uh, and it used to carry control signals and timing signals, and it controls the it can its control signal indicates the type of operation, and timing signals are used to synchronize the memory and the IO operation with the CPU clock, and it carries signals that report the status of the various devices, and it controls many signals like memory read, memory write, input output read, input output write, etc., etc. Yeah, this is on. Bhagav, can you change to next slide? Bhagav? Yeah. No, you changed a lot. There is a no the no previous one. This one. Yeah, this is the types of bus depending upon the lines, and these are classified into data bus, address bus, control bus, and expansion bus, which is an additional part to system bus configuration. And address bus, data bus, it is the data bus allows the data to travel back and forth between the microprocessor CPU and the memory RAM. And the address bus indicates the carries the information about the location of data in the memory, and the control bus indicates the carries the control signal that makes sure everything is flowing in smoothly from place to place. And this expansion bus is an additional part to this system bus. If there is a need to an extra space, or if there is a need to store extra or communicate extra more fastly and efficiently, then this expansion bus will come into the picture. It says like, if your computer has an expansion slot, there is an expansion bus. Messages and information passes between your computer and add in boards to plug in over the expansion bus. As a diagram suggests the same thing. Then Bhargav, next slide. Yeah, development of bus system. Previously, like the the previous one, like develop. Okay, previously in the trade, previously first first time the bus system on like this, the traditional bus system. Like let us discuss about the traditional bus system. It says like there is a processor and there will be a cache memory which will be it will be connected to local bus through a local input output memory. This cache memory and the main memory will be connected to system of bus, which which will be the traditional bus system of which will be the traditional bus system. In the if the expansion bus slot comes into the picture, then this expansion bus interface will be connected to the system bus, and this expansion bus interface will be connected to expansion bus, and this will be connected to modem and the network. So this is how will be the outlook of the traditional bus system previously. Now, back on next slide. Now let us see the developments. Uh, as a CPU design evolved into using a faster local buses and slower peripheral buses, Intel adopted the dual independent bus (DIB) terminology, using the external front side bus to main system memory and internal bus backside bus between one or more CPUs and CPU cache. Pentonic Pro and Pentium 2. Since 2005 and 2006, considering an architecture in which four processors share a chipnet, the DIB is composed by two buses. Each of them is shared among two CPU. The theoretical bandwidth is doubled compared to a shared front side bus up to 12.8 GP per second in the best case. Snoop filters were used to catch Snoop information. Modern personal servers computer use higher performance interconnection technologies such as hypertransport and Intel Quick Path Interconnect. The bus architecture is continued to be used on a simple embedded microprocessor, and this is how it goes. And the next part is the now the bus system has developed into its fourth generation, which is the Compute Express Link CXL. Is an open standard interconnect for high-speed CPU to a device and CPU to memory, designed to accelerate next generation data centered performance. So this is the latest fourth generation bus system of the computer architecture. Bhargav, can you go to next slide? IO interface. It is the input and output interface. Input output interface is used as a method which helps in transferring information between internal storage devices, like for example how like memory and external peripheral devices. It is the it is it, which provides the input and the output of the computer. For example, the keyboard and the mouse provides input to the computer are called input devices, while the monitor and the printer that provides output to the computers are called output devices. So this is the general outline of input output interface. Bhargav, next slide. Ah, and yeah, as I said previously, the method that is used to transfer information between internal storage and external input and output devices is known as input-output interface. The CPU is interfaced using special communication links by the peripheral connected to any computer system. These communication links are used to resolve differences between CPU and peripherals. There exist special hardware components between CPU and peripheral to supervise and synchronize all input and output transfers that are called interface units. The binary information that is received from an external device is usually stored in the memory unit. The information that is used from the CPU to the external device is originated from the memory unit. CPU merely process the information, but the source and the target is always the memory unit. Data transfer between CPU and the IO input and output device may be done in a different modes. Like it is like if it is like two guys who doesn't know a common language with each other, but they need to communicate with each other. So in that point, there comes a translator who translates their language to other language, or the other guy's language to this guy's language. The same applies here in this input output interface. Like this because the internal device will be having some certain codes which will not be able to be understandable to the external peripheral devices, and there comes the internal input output interface which will translate that code to this external peripheral devices language and translate it, and the same vice versa will occur in that way. Yeah, this and the next slide. Yeah, the data transfer to from the peripheral may be done in three possible ways. Like I discussed before, it needs a translator to translate its language to another language, or the other language to its this language. So it will be done by three methods, and the first one is programmed input and output, and interrupted initiative input and output, and direct memory access (DMA). So this is how the general outline of the input output bus and the interface module look like. The and back next slide. Yeah, the first one, the programmed input and output. Each data transfers is initiated by an.
Just a minute. Till which slide you are going to present, Google?
Just two more, sir. This one and three more, sir.
Yes. Then go ahead.
Okay. Shall I proceed or shall I stop it?
Yes. Go ahead.
Each data item transfer is initiated by an instruction in the program. Usually, the transfer is from a CPU register and a memory. In this case, it requires a constant monitoring by the CPU of the peripheral devices. For an example, let us take an example like the input and output device does not allow direct access to the memory unit. A transfer from an input output device to a memory requires the execution of several instructions by the CPU, including an input instruction to the transfer the data from the device to the CPU and store information to transfer the data from CPU to memory. In programmed input and output, the CPU stays in a program loop until this input and output device unit indicates that it is ready for data transfer. Bhargav, next slide. And this is the second one, interrupted initiative input and output. Since in the above case we saw the CPUs kept busy unnecessarily, the situation can very well be avoided by using an interrupted driven method for data transfer. By using interrupted facility and the special command to inform the interface to issue an interrupted request signal whenever the data is available from any device. Whenever the data is available from any device. In the meantime, the CPU can proceed from any other program execution. The interface meanwhile keeps monitoring the device whenever it is determined that the device is ready for data transfer. It initiates an interrupted request signal to the computer. Upon detection of an external input signal, the CPU stops monetarily the task, and that it was already performing branches to the service program to program the IOA transfer. I mean the input output transfer, and then return to the task it was originally performing. Yeah, Bhargav, next slide. Both methods, like the summary of these two program input and output program and the interrupted driven program. The both the methods, programmed input and output and the interrupted driven input and output requires the active intervention of the processor to transfer data from data between memory and the input output module, and any data transfer must transfers a path through the processor. Thus, both these forms of input and output suffers from two inherent drawbacks. The input output transfer rate is limited by the speed with which the processor can test and service a device. The processor is tied up in managing an input output transfer. A number of instructions must be executed for each input and output transfer. So this is the summary of the first programmed input and driven interrupted. It's interrupted driven input and output. There are many other functions of this. Like it is used to synchronize the operating speed of the CPU with respect to the input output devices. It also converts digital data into analog servers, or the vice versa will occur. It is also capable of providing signals like control and timing signals. In this data, the buffering can be possible through data bus. It can also control serial data into parallel data and vice versa will occur. The same goes on. And yeah, that's it, sir. The last slide. Yeah, that's it, sir.
Yes, very good, Gogol. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
And any
Thank you,
doubts
sir.
from the rest of the batches to the second batch? Any doubts? Okay, then if you don't have any other question, then the second batch, you please answer for this question. As you belongs to a production engineer, what is the need to do? What is the need to have an attention towards computer architecture and other the evaluation of the processor, memory, bus system, and different languages, and why we need to worry about these heads? How this can be related to numerical methods or a production engineer? Yes, second batch, anyone, you please
Okay,
unmute your
sir.
mic and
Sir,
yes.
sir, myself, sir.
Yes, Kabilan. Go ahead, Kabilan. Any
Hello.
answers?
Am I
For
audible,
this?
sir?
Yes, Kabilan.
Okay, sir. So as I said in that memory hierarchical diagram, you see, sir, the register memories, they can't store much, but it is easily accessible, sir. While we come to the last thing, that is the secondary memory, it is not easily accessible, but it can store more memory. In production now, it is moving on to automation, sir. It's going on to machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all those stuff. So for that, we basically need more speed. The access time should be faster. So we have to like design our systems such that we can for fast performance for automation also, so that we can design using that numerical calculation. We can use numerical methods, sir.
Yes, absolutely. Very good, Kabilan. Very good. I think Kabilan and Google took larger part. But my request is you share your contents equally and do the presentation. If it is so, then those who are presenting a larger number and those who are presenting good, they will get more marks. My intention, you all took part equally and get more marks. That is what my intention. Thank you for your presentation. Tomorrow we will meet around 12:30. Kritika, what is your plan, Kritika? Tomorrow you're continuing with for slide number 49 until this one you are going to present, right?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Nundal. Tomorrow we will meet.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.